Welcome to the Old Man of the Three with JJ Redick and Tommy Alter, presented by Cash App and brought to you by 342 Productions. This is episode 91, John Collins. Tommy, I really enjoyed this conversation for a number of reasons. We got into some really high-level conversation about a number of topics, but what really impressed me the most, and we've had a number of young guys on the podcast who have been great at an early age, and like John, have been able to rely on their athleticism and their physical gifts, but really delving into the psyche of someone like John who understands what it takes to be great and working on his skill set. And he's clearly put in the work. He's turned into such a great three-point shooter. And it just, for me, it just seems like his ceiling gets higher and higher every year.
Yeah, it's interesting with a guy like this at his age. You know, he knows what he does well, and he knows what he needs to get better at. We talk about, three-point shooting, for example, specifically with him and the jump that he's made there, even over the last couple of years. But just to your point, having that self-awareness, explains a lot about where he is.
And he has been, for the last four seasons, this season included, a 20-10 guy. His numbers are down a little bit this year, his counting numbers, but his efficiency numbers are still off the charts. And the other part of the conversation I love is when we get into the two-man game that him and Trey have, which I think is one of the best two-man games in the NBA. Before we get to our conversation with John, we should acknowledge the COVID outbreak in the NBA. I know we talked about it last week with Tyrese Halliburton. It's gotten worse since then. I believe Adam Silver yesterday said 90% of the current cases right now in the NBA are Omicron. But I want to touch briefly, Tommy, on both Adam Silver's comments yesterday and to a larger degree, Joe Biden's comments. You and I have both been very cautious. We wore masks, indoor, outdoor, forever. We got vaccinated as soon as we could get vaccinated. We got our booster shots as soon as we could get boosted. Recognizing there's always still a risk of getting COVID. I had a breakthrough case in August and I was asymptomatic. But I found it interesting in both their comments yesterday, basically saying to a degree, we are not going to eradicate the virus. We are going to have to learn how to live with it. And the best, basically, protection you can have is to get vaccinated and boosted. And you and I have talked about this a bunch privately. For us, we know we're healthy 30-somethings. Our concern always is community spread and putting at-risk people in a dicey situation. And I just found it fascinating. Both their comments mirrored each other a little bit yesterday.
Yep. Do you feel like the response from the league has been where it needs to be at this point?
I don't think there's an easy answer to this. There hasn't been an easy answer to lockdown measures, to shutting down the economy, to shutting down the NBA, to shutting down sports leagues. There's not an easy answer. And it's part of the reason we asked John specifically about this from a current player perspective and what his concerns are and what his desire to play is and what his teammates' desire to play is. And we'll let you guys hear that part of the conversation. But I just, if I'm the NBA and I've had 97% of my players vaccinated, I think something like 60% of my players boosted, 90% of the current cases are Omicron, which is, according to all the data out there, is mild symptoms. There was an article this morning. South Africa is about 2 weeks ahead of us. The data coming out of there is very positive in terms of low hospitalizations for people that are vaccinated. Yes,
England and Netherlands too.
So I think the right course of action is to continue to play the season unless something else changes.
Yeah.
The really hard part is just finding enough bodies to play, which we've seen the scramble occur, and Atlanta's no different. They've got Clint Capella down. Danilo Gallinari went in protocols yesterday. Trey Young has been in protocols. It's a really difficult situation to figure out a perfect answer to.
I think the one other thing, to the leagues, to defend the league for a second, is this jumped up on them the same way it jumped up on all of us. I mean, I think everybody watching at home, listening at home, this time, maybe even this time last week, but definitely, the last weekend, I don't think there was any thought that, if I've gotten a booster, I've gotten the vax, I've gotten whatever, I can't go to a restaurant, I can't go to a bar, I can't go to any sort of indoor establishment. And then within, 72 hours, everything changed. And unfortunately, when you have a thing like a traveling party where everyone is so close together, clearly with something like this, if one person has it, odds are everyone's going to get it. And so how are you supposed to really respond to that?
This all has happened fast in the last 10 days or so. And you've seen a bunch of the NBA writers tweet out the information on, average daily the average number of players on a daily basis put into protocols, where it was like 4 or 5 over the course of a 3-day period. And all of a sudden last week it spiked. And we've now got, I think it's something like 117 players as of this recording in December that have been placed into protocols. One of the interesting sort of timing things about this is that we're a couple days away now from the Christmas games, which are in general, especially with the NFL season going on, generally the Christmas games are sort of the jump-off point. I know we played 30 games, but the jump-off point for the NBA season, for the amount of attention the NBA gets. And it's in the league's best interest. This is not a very novel take, but it's in the league's best interest to play these games. But what has happened now is we have such uncertainty about who's actually going to be in the lineup for these games. And Atlanta's a great example of that. They play the Knicks in the first game at MSG, the return of Trae Young in an unbelievable environment. And now that has all been sort of put into question because of this outbreak over the last 10 days.
Before we get to these games, and we're going to sort of break down our favorite matchups and all of them, isn't it weird that last season started today?
Yeah.
I was thinking that the other day, that like just because of everything thrown off, like it really feels like a lot has happened. A lot has happened in the world, but a lot has also happened just in basketball.
Yeah, it's true. And John talks about this in terms of the routine as a player and how sacred that is, whether it's the seasonal flow of a normal NBA season, which he got to experience his first 2 years, or the flow and routine of a game day, practice days. He talks a bunch about practices being canceled. And really since March of 2020, that flow for any athlete in any sport has been thrown off. And last year, even I remember, I've talked about this a bunch. I was not in a good place mentally and emotionally for all of the season, and a lot of that had to do with COVID and protocols and being lonely and just being stuck in my hotel room and being stuck in my apartment in New Orleans. And I realized I'm just going to give everybody a pass. If I'm this bad right now, I'm giving everybody a pass. And LeBron kind of touched on this last night after the Phoenix game, in which they lost by 18. They asked him, where do you guys sort of compare with Phoenix right now? And he's like, look, for the most part, they've had their team. They've been relatively healthy. Obviously, Devin Booker was out 7 games, but they have the depth to continue to win. And the Lakers, for the most part, have not been whole and have not been able to catch that rhythm, either through injuries or because of COVID protocols.
Yep. So I'm going to run through these games. So we have Atlanta, New York. We have Boston, Milwaukee. We have Golden State, Phoenix, Brooklyn, Lakers, and Dallas, Utah. And obviously, the league has actually come out and said this, depending on what happens over the next couple of days, some of these are subject to change. But that's the plan for right now. Which are you most excited about?
I mean, the obvious one is Golden State, Phoenix. Those two teams are in top form, and they've split the season series so far. It's prime time. It's that perfect spot where you probably have already had your Christmas dinner.
Your eggnog?
Your eggnog.
Your spiked eggnog?
I said nutmeg. I like nutmeg in my eggnog. But you've already had all that. All the presents have been opened. So that to me is the most exciting game. And again, I'm really excited to see game to game now. They played twice. What adjustments are being made? How they're guarding Steph? How Golden State defends the pick and roll versus Chris and Devin. It's going to be a great game. The other one that's really interesting to me is the Brooklyn-LA game. Obviously, those two teams are not at full strength right now, but I'm interested to see how the Lakers perform given their recent struggles a home game in LA. You've got the Nets in the building. We've kind of said this a couple times. It feels like the Lakers have just been stop and go all season, and they haven't really developed that sense of urgency that they can carry game to game. And so maybe this game will be a jumping off point. I think back a lot to my first year in Philly. We were 14-18 going into the Christmas Day game. We had the noon game at MSG. We won that game 14-18. We finished the season 38-12. This day has always been a marquee day for the NBA. And so for a team like LA, this could be a jumping off point if they play well and win this game.
Do we know if KD is going to play?
I don't know.
That's the crazy thing with this. I mean, with Brooklyn right now, it's just you don't even know who's showing up. Even the Kyrie thing, it's they go from he's playing to he's in he's in protocols now. So it's like day by day with all of this stuff.
Giannis in Milwaukee. We just don't know.
I was gonna say one besides the obvious, they have the two best records in the league. The other nice thing about Golden State Phoenix is in terms of this, knock on wood, we're taping this on Wednesday, they are fairly healthy. Wiggins is out and Jordan Poole is out, but I don't think anybody in Phoenix is at this point.
Right. Obviously Clay's still not there, but no, I agree. The marquee players in terms of Steph and Draymond, they should be on the court. Chris and Devin and DeAndre and Mikal Bridges, they should be on the court. They played last night. So knock on wood, we get a relatively healthy marquee game with Golden State Phoenix.
So I pulled a couple of the latest FanDuel MVP futures and with the guys playing in these games and one who's not. And I had a question for you about them. So right now, Steph is still, like we talked about last time, still odds-on favorite. He's plus 135. KD's plus 240. Giannis is plus 950. And Jokic is plus 1,400. And then everybody, there's a sort of a steep drop-off from there. My question was about KD in particular. And this particular category, because thinking about the game the other night, last Tuesday, when he was basically playing with four guys who were, borderline NBA players, because the rest of the team was out, and he wins. And at a certain point, no matter how the season ends up, when you see something like that, when you're basically like this guy, and I think actually John mentioned it in our conversation, when you see a player win an NBA game, knowing how hard it is to win an NBA game with guys that, no disrespect to them, are not his normal teammates, does that change the dynamic when you're thinking about this conversation a little bit?
It's the MVP race is really interesting to me this year because of the uncertainty. The uncertainty, of course, of injury, which is always there, but the uncertainty of not just the individual players' health related to COVID, but more importantly, how his team is in terms of the number of players in protocols. And Jokic, I'll say it again, has had as good of an individual season maybe as we've seen in the NBA, period. I mean, player efficiency rating, number one by far of all time. And that's including Wilt, Michael, LeBron, Larry, Magic, you name it, down the line. Best ever. And he's somehow, scrapped his way to basically a 500 mark. What happens when Jamal Murray comes back? Do they go on a run? Does Golden State at any point in time go through a 2-5 stretch?
Yeah.
Does that change the narrative about Steph a little bit? Giannis from day one has been phenomenal, and I still think he has a legitimate shot to win his third MVP. But the best player in the world, it's so weird. It feels like it changes almost on a daily or weekly basis. Obviously, Kevin, I think, is the best player in the world. But in terms of who is playing the best across the league, at times it's been Steph. At times it's been Giannis. At times it's been Jokic. And so monitoring the health of team-wide for these players is really, I think, going to help determine who ultimately wins MVP. It'll be factored into that narrative, which, again, we voters don't just vote on stats. They vote on the narrative about a team, and that's going to be factored in, which in most seasons, injuries may be factored in, but this is just a bizarre circumstance, and it'll certainly be factored in. Is there anybody there, by the way, if you were not picking Kevin or Steph, they're the odds-on favorites right now. Is there anybody there that sort of jumps out to you, either Giannis or Jokic?
Besides the top four?
Yeah.
You mean? Well, so I have the whole list. I mean, this is you're going to laugh at this pick. You're going to think it's crazy, and I don't think he's going to win the MVP. I don't think there's really any chance. But I think when you look at somebody like DeMar at a plus 6,500, you look at where that team was versus where they are now, and obviously they got Lonzo, they got Caruso, they've made a couple of other additions, but I think if you're making this choice based on just straight up team value, and this was in addition to a team that was not in the play-in game last year and is now, depending on their health, could compete for a 1 or 2 seed. They're the 2 seed right now. I think he has to be in the conversation. I would have him in the conversation more than, a guy like Luka right now, as talented as Luka is, and Luka's much higher, just based off of team success. Like that to me is more important than, like who wins if the two of them are playing one-on-one.
Right. There's a legitimate argument to be made that if you had an MVP vote today, after basically 30 games, DeMar would be in the top 5 of that vote across the league. I'm not just saying my vote. I'm just saying across the league, all the voters, he's top 5 MVP candidate right now. The other guy, of course, that has been mentioned a lot, and I don't know what his odds are on FanDuel, but Chris Paul, of course, is getting a lot of love in MVP talk. Not necessarily as a favorite, but certainly as a top 5 candidate.
He's a good sleeper pick. I was going to ask you about him because he's plus 6,500 right now. Devin is plus 5,500, but that team is a monster. They're a very good chance to finish with the best record in the NBA, and if those guys stay healthy, you would think that one of those two is going to be in this conversation. There should be,
no doubt. And the other point about both those teams, I think they're the 2 most fun teams to watch. It's beautiful basketball. There's an element of the Phoenix Suns ball movement that is eerily similar to those 2010 to 2015 Spurs teams. There's just it's downhill to an attack, to a swing, to an attack, to a swing, open Cam Johnson 3. And they have the shooting and the spacing and the philosophy that creates just beautiful basketball plays. Tommy, I know on FanDuel as well, you can bet on all the Christmas Day games. Obviously, we don't have the spreads yet, and given the uncertainty about the lineups, those may change in real time. But if you want to sign up for FanDuel, use promo code JJ. Download the app. You can go to sportsbook.fanduel.com as well. You got to be 21 or over. Age and location restrictions apply, and you can see the full terms again at sportsbook.fanduel.com. One housekeeping note for everyone. We are taking next week off. We want to wish everybody a very happy holiday season. We also just want to acknowledge our listeners and our viewers. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for being a part of our community and our audience. We have just thoroughly enjoyed putting out shows for you guys over the last year. And of course, thank you to Cash App and FanDuel for being amazing partners for us. Let's get to our conversation with John Collins.